Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to capture a cabochon and cover it with stars. And if you stay tuned right till the end of the video there might be a little surprise. But otherwise if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So first of all we need our wires, and I'm using regular round silver coated copper wire. Now the first gauge is a 0.4mm. This is going to be a weaving wire. Then I'm using a 0.8mm which is going to be our base wire. The 0.6mm will be used to make the stars with. And finally the 0.25 is just to attach a few pieces together. For the stone I'm using this 4mm round gemstone cabochon and it's labradorite. You can see that absolutely beautiful sugar in it, all the colours. Now of course you can use whatever kind of stone or cabochon that you want to, and it also doesn't have to be this size or shape. You can customise the design to fit loads of different sizes and shapes. I just feel that the labradorite here really goes well with the design of the stars as well. So the pliers I'll be using is a mix between the basic ones. So first of all here I have my fludge cutters to be able to cut a wire. I then have my tweezer nose pliers to be able to manipulate the wire. Round nose pliers for any loops that we need to make. And finally I've got a crochet hook because I like to use that to help shape the bail because they come in so many different sizes. Now most of these materials are from Jewellery Maker, so what I'm going to do is leave links and product codes in the description box down below in case you want to check any of them out for yourself. Otherwise let's get all our tools and materials ready and let's get started. Then we need to cut some lengths of wire, and first of all I have 4 lengths of my 0.8mm here of about 40 centimeters each. I've then cut 2 lengths of the 0.6mm of about 30 centimeters each. Now the 0.4mm wire I'm leaving attached to the reel because it's hard to know exactly how much we're going to need, and also that way there's less wastage. Now before we get started I just want to mention that in this case here what I did before starting any wire work, I created a little sketch for the design that I wanted. So I put my cabochon on a piece of paper and then traced around it so I got the perfect size and shape of it, and then from there I kind of created the design on the sketch. That way I can always refer back to this as a reference, but also in case I want to use this as a template of some sort, for instance maybe to make the stars with. So you can do the same if you have a different size or shape, or if you have the exact same size and shape of cabochon. What I'm going to do is make this available on my website so you can go there and download and print it off yourself, and you're welcome to use that for your own reference. There will also be a link straight to that in the description box down below. Otherwise let's just get on with creating our piece. So first I'm going to grab my 4 lengths of 0.8mm here that we cut ready, and we need to start our weave. I also have my length of 0.4mm, but this is still attached to the reel, remember that. And then I'm just going to grab one of my base wires at a time because we first of all need to start the weave, but obviously attach our wires together. So what I'm going to do is not start all the way towards one end of my base wire. I'm going to go in, this is roughly the middle, and then I'm going to go a little bit to one side, but still make sure I leave a decent tail here. So what I'm going to do is just towards one end of the weaving wire there, place it behind and then wrap it around once. So that is attached. Now I'm just going to wrap this around 5 times first of all. So 2, 3, and just make sure that all the wraps are nice and tight. You can always use pliers if you need to squeeze them together, especially here at the beginning where it's a little bit fiddly. And then 4 and 5. Then I'm going to start bringing in the other base wires. So I'm going to grab my next one and then place that above the first one and make sure about the same distance in there. And then we need to start the weave straight away as well. So I'm going to take my weaving wire, it's coming below there, and then go over the top of both of them and then kind of push it towards the wraps a little bit, come down behind and then come up between the two like that. And then also you can just push a little bit down there, that helps tighten everything up. Then straight away grab the next one, place that as the new top one, and again about even on the ends there. Then go over the top of the top two. So we're kind of stepping upwards, and again kind of bring it towards the back. But then now I'm going to grab the last one, place it in the same way as the new top one, but then I'm going to grab the weaving wire and come straight behind it but upwards like this, and just kind of do it gently so we don't pull any of the base wires out of shape. So we want them to lay nicely like this next to each other. And then I'm going to come down between the top two, which means that the weaving wire here is just wrapping around the top one by itself basically. And then we're at the top, so we now need to step downwards again. So I'm going to go down, which means I'm going to come up between the bottom 2 base wires because we want to basically replicate the first side that we did. So I'm coming up there and then go up over the 2 wires that are in the middle. So these two here go over the top of them, come down between the top two, and then down behind to come up beneath the bottom one there, and then down between the middle two. So right straight through the middle, and then push all that tight. I like kind of using my nails as well to help push it tight. And then finally, this is basically that little kind of flourish section. Then I'm just going to go and wrap around the bottom one by itself, again making sure to make them nice and tight. And it's really up to you how much spacing you want between these. I like to wrap 5 times here around the bottom one, just like I did when we started out. So that's 3, 4, and 5 for the last one. So that is basically our first little section. And now we just need to continue. So I'm just going to show you one more time, because the first time, obviously, the base wires, we were also attaching them together. We don't need to do that now. So I've already done my 5 single wraps. Then I'm going to go over the top of the bottom 2 base wires, so straight down the middle, then come up between the 2 I just wrapped over the top of, and just give that a little push. Then step up 1, so over the top of the next 2, which means down between the top 2. And now instead of coming down behind again, we need to push it upwards behind the top one by itself to wrap around that by itself as well. Now just do it gently and come down between the top 2 again. So we do that single wrap around the top one, and then we can step downwards again. So up between the bottom 2 base wires here to wrap around over the top of the middle 2, come down behind, and then over the top of the bottom 2, which means we go down, straight down the middle there to complete this little section. And then do the spacing in between. So just wrap around the bottom base wire by itself, same amount of times if you want to keep it symmetrical. So again, I'm going to do it 5 times. And you just want to continue like this, basically until we have about half the length that we need. So now I reach what's going to be the midpoint of the weave here. And I'm just stopping because I just want to start shaping it first of all. So obviously the length for this will depend on the cabochon you're using. So you can always reference this to your sketch or the cabochon itself. So what I'm going to do is grab my tweezer nose pliers here, and we want to basically put a bend into all these wires. So right after where my wraps end, make sure they're pushed nice and close together, I'm going to grab onto all of the wires, just all the way along there, and then start pushing towards the back of the weave, so kind of away from yourself. And what I'm doing as well is doing it so I'm not just going straight like this. I want to make sure that these wires lay at a bit of an angle. So I'm also kind of pushing them back a little bit, so they're kind of slanted backwards. So instead of being a wall straight up, it's going to be laying like this over the top of the side of the cabochon. And then just keep bending them to basically create a bit of a point. And then just make sure to push the top wires in a little bit, so like I said, you kind of get that slanted effect more. And then once we have that in place, down here what I did last was the 5 single wraps along the bottom wire. Now I just want to move to the other side of the bend, so I'm just going to do another 5 in my case here. Obviously you can customize it to how you're doing your weave. So I'm just going to basically do another 5 single wrap along that bottom wire to get to the equivalent other side there, and then we literally just want to start the weave again. And you just want to keep doing this until we have the same length on this side as we do on the original side. So now it's time to start shaping this into the proper shape we're going to end up with, and I like to just use the cabochon itself for this. So I'm just going to do this on a flat surface and kind of start pushing the cabochon down towards that corner that we made a little bit, and then also start to making sure it's laying flat on the surface there. I'm going to start to bring the sides further in so they also get a shape and actually capture around the cabochon, and then the aim is for them to meet back up at the top. So we end up with something a bit like this. And then what I'm going to do is actually just put my wires in place at the top here. So we got 4 from one side and 4 from the other. And instead of them just overlapping like this, I'm going to actually intertwine them, which means I want to bring them just one at a time in between each other, you could say, instead of having them in the groups like this. So just taking one and the next one, moving one further up. So you can see they're now intertwining there at the top. Basically the wires are intertwining with each other like this, and that's just going to kind of help keep them a little bit better in the shape. And we now have the basic shape of the frame there in place. And I also still have my weaving wire attached, that's also still attached to the reel because I'm going to use that for the bail, which is now the next thing that we're going to be focusing on. So what I'm going to do is the first 2 wires here at the front, so the one coming from one side crossing towards the opposite side and the one on the opposite side there, the first 2 front ones, I'm going to just push them out of the way a little bit because what I want to get to are the next ones in. So you want to be happy with the shape of the piece. And then it's the next 2 wires. So the first one here, obviously I'm going to grab first, that I'm going to use here to make the bail with. So I just want to get my tweezers nose pliers and get right in there, grab onto the wire and then bend it back in the direction, towards the direction where it's actually coming from. And just the same with the one on the other side there, the equivalent one. So they are coming back towards their own side, you could say. And then that's kind of created this opening. Now what I'm also just going to do is you can just kind of maneuver the other wires here out of the way. I'm going to leave these for now, not work with them just yet, but just gently get them out of the way because now we're going to be focusing on the bail. So as I'm starting the weaving for the bail, I like to just put my cabochon back in the frame there just to help make sure that it keeps its shape, but also if we have a bit of gap between these 2 base wires, it will tell us basically what that distance needs to be so we don't tighten out too much and make sure that it still fits around the cabochon. Now I'm grabbing the weaving wire here that's still attached to the reel, just get it into position where it's coming behind this wire here, so the bottom base wire of how I'm holding it. And then basically what I'm going to do now is start the weave I'm going to use for the bail. Now I'm going to be using diagonal wire weave for this one here, but you can also use a figure of 8. So I'm going to go around this bottom base wire just once by itself and then go over the top of both of them. Now bear in mind we're only focusing on these 2 here for the bail, and then I'm going to come up between the 2 and go around that top one by itself. And then just make sure to push the wraps nice and tight and get those wraps right in there towards the bottom where they won't go any further. Come back down behind to the bottom one, wrap around that once, go over the top of both of them, and then up between the 2 to wrap around the top one by itself, and then down behind again. And just continue like this. Now as you can see, I've got my wires coming out a little bit gradually, so it's going to make the bail kind of graduate outwards nicely. And I'm going to continue weaving like this until I get to the point that's going to be the top of the bail, you could say, that's going to be the actual midpoint. So just keep doing that. So now I've reached that midpoint here, and I want this to then be the widest point on the bail. That means I'm going to grab my tweezers nose pliers and just basically gently bend the wire to come back towards the middle again, so something a bit like that. And then we just want to continue weaving here in the same way. The difference now is that instead of weaving from a narrow point to a wider point, which is easy enough, we're now weaving from a wider point to a narrower, so the opposite obviously. And that is a little bit more tricky because what you'll find is the wire will want to slip towards the narrower point there. So if you just keep weaving, it's going to want to kind of slip upwards there, and obviously that will affect the look of the bail. So just to show you what I like to do to try and counteract that is continue with the same weave obviously, but then as you can see it wants to slip upwards there. As I'm weaving, I just want to make sure that basically I keep pushing it downwards towards the weed section I've already done, and every time I then swap, so for instance now I'm going to the bottom one here, I then make sure to keep hold of the weave that I've already done, push it downwards and grab hold of it and kind of push it down on the opposite side. You can use your nails or anything, and then push this down as you're tightening it. Then I'm crossing over to the opposite side there, and when I'm going to go around that, I'm going to then make sure to again push down on the opposite side because that will keep it downwards and also making sure the weave is nice and tight. So that's just a little tip of how to manage that, and otherwise keep weaving here until we have the same length, so we end up with the complete length we need for the bail. So now I've finished weaving the bail and it looks like this. What I then just like to do is just sort out these wires here on the back. So because we intertwined them like that, they are overlapping each other a little bit. So what I want to do is just open up the 2 outer ones, and then the other 2 I just want to bring them in between them to bring them further in, just to make it a little less bulky up around here, but still keep that same intertwining position. So just kind of get these into rough position, and then you can see it's a little less bulky there, because then we need to shape the bail. Now I also just like to bring these 2 wires that are left at the front towards the back, and I'm just going to do that around the sides. So the wire that's going straight towards the left in this case, just bring it around the left side of the bail towards the back, and then the other one around the other side, again towards the back, and then just kind of bring them down for now, out of the way, and then we can go in and shape the bail. So for this is where I like to use my crochet hooks because they come in many different sizes. So I just want to place this behind roughly the midpoint of the bail, so that widest point, and then obviously this is the front towards me and the back is away from me, and I want to then push the bail around the crochet hook. Just push it forward a little bit first and then push it backwards around the crochet hook so the ends come down, and basically you could say join up with all the other base wires there. We just want to push it nice and tight so we end up with something a bit like this, and you can just kind of open any wires up you need to here on the back just to get it in position. And then also now, because we made the bail, we have finished using this weaving wire that's still attached to the reel, so I can go in and cut that off and literally just leave a short little tail, so we have that to just fasten the bail with. We are then done using that. And now before we deal with any of these wires here on the back, I want to make my stars and attach them as well, because I'm then going to use these wires on the back to actually capture the cabochon in place. So that's why I'm going to leave them for now. And I'm then grabbing my 2 lengths of 0.6mm wires here that I'm going to use for the stars, and just starting with one at a time. So I grab my tweezers and nose pliers here, and I'm going to use these to make the stars with. And I'm going to start on one end of my wire here, and I'm going to push the wire, so the long end of my wire, against the pliers, and we want not quite a 90-degree angle, but then what I like to do is just go on either side of that bend as well and just push on either side, and that kind of sharpens up that angle. So we're at this point. Then now I'm going to make the first point of the star, and in this case I kind of like to use my pliers as a guide of where to make my bends. So I'm going to start with the largest star, and obviously all pliers are different as well, so I'm just using these specific ones for reference. It's the Soren tweezer nose pliers. Leave a link for the description box down below. But what I like to then do is use the very tip of the pliers as a guide. So for the largest one, I'm basically doing 2 lengths, you could say, or widths of the plier, the very end there, and then I make my next bend, and obviously pushing the wire in the opposite direction to create that point in the star, and also just go on either side of that bend and sharpen it up a bit, and then moving on from there. So put my pliers all the way as far as they'll go towards the bend we just made, and then again I measure by kind of doubling up the width of my pliers. So I'm grabbing hold of the wire there and then bending the wire against the pliers again. And this is also a little tip for making the stars. When you've then created a point here, what you then want to do is have these 2 lengths, so the wire on either side of the point, basically line up with each other, more or less in a straight line. Obviously it does not have to be perfect, but more or less. And then this will be the very first point of the star. Moving on, same principle, measure about 2 widths of my pliers, make the point, just sharpen it up, and then moving on, and I keep moving my wire as well for however I need to hold it so it's more comfortable, and then move out 2 widths, push the wire against the pliers opposite direction to create the inner point, you could say. And again, make sure that this wire lines up with the opposite one, so the one that's on either side of the point that we just made. Kind of imagine if it went straight across beneath the point, and basically you just want to continue like this all the way around till we have the complete 5-pointed star. So now reach back to the beginning here, as you can see, and I basically created the complete star, and I have my 2 wire ends overlapping. So I just make sure that the long end that I'm working with laps over the top of the other one, and then I want to continue, so kind of completing the last point here properly, because now what I want to do is, after completing the star, I'm going to need to move my way down to the right position to start creating the next star, because they're all going to be connected and made from one piece of wire. And just leave that initial little tail that we left, don't worry about that just yet. But then I just want to follow the star that I already made. So now we don't need to kind of do the measuring bit, but just follow what we already made. So just put your pliers into those corners and follow the same pattern. So you could call it that we're basically tracing the star that we already made, and we end up partly with double wires laying on top of each other, but we obviously will keep that shape of the star because we're following the same shape. Now I'm at a point where I want to start bringing this away from the current star and be able to make the next one. So I'm going to bring it now all the way out. Instead of following the shape, bring it out and away from this star so we can continue and then start making the next one. And it's the same principle with that. I'm going to use the pliers themselves to kind of help measure. Now I want each star to get gradually smaller. So from the largest that I just made until the very smallest, that's the last one we're going to make. So here, what I'm going to do, instead of using the width of the pliers times 2, I'm just going to do a little bit less. So again, I'm kind of judging this by eye. So the first width of the pliers, and then move, instead of all the way to double, just stop a little bit before that. So this next star becomes a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to start making the first point, and again using that same measuring. So 1 full width and a bit instead of 2, and then bend it all the way back to create that first point. And then again, you just want to continue like this all the way around until we create a complete star again, but that's slightly smaller. And again, when I've completed the star here, I want to make sure that I'm overlapping over the top of the previous star that I made, and then just create that final point. And then again, now moving from here and down to the point where I need to start the next star. So following the shape until I'm going to then come away from this star to be able to make the next one. And again, making sure I make this from now, this third one here, just gradually smaller than the one that I just made. So again, use my pliers, the one width plus a bit, but less than I did on this one, and then start making that star in the exact same way. And again, once you complete the third star, then move on, follow the path, and then for the final star, just bend the wire and get that in position. And here I'm just going to use the one width of the pliers, so literally put it against the bend and then bend against the pliers there, sharpen up the corner, and then again just put the pliers all the way down. And then once we complete the final star, we need to bring the working wire underneath the other stars instead of over like we've been doing, because that way when we finish up going underneath the shape of the star where we need to finish, it's going to end up underneath it, same as we have it right in the beginning there. And then just to show you how it's going to look with the frame, obviously this is one of them that's going to be sitting somewhat like this. Now what you can do, if you find that it doesn't quite fit with the outside of the frame there, you can adjust the points where the stars kind of meet each other, so adjust the angles a little bit if you need to bring anything in or out to make it fit, because obviously we need for these stars to meet up with that frame so we can connect them together. And then before we attach our stars to the frame, we just want to get rid of the ends of the wire there. So I'm just flipping it to the back where both of the wires are coming out, and then just take my flush cutters and cut off the excess, making sure that when I've cut it, the end isn't sticking out away from the star, but it's hidden underneath that top layer of wire. So it's going to be hidden under there and obviously not cause an issue when the piece is finished. And the same on the other end. We then have it ready to attach to the frame. And this is then where I get a length of my 0.25mm wire. It doesn't matter how long, just whatever you're comfortable working with. I think I have about 40 to 50 centimeters or so. And then what we need to do is starting with one of them, and then just lay it on the frame and see where it's going to be attached. And basically all the points of the stars that meet up with the frame is where we want to connect them together. So I can tell my first connection point, I'm just going to start on one end, it's going to be up here, and it's going to meet up with the frame right there. So I want to start by bringing my 0.25mm wire. I'm just going to start by putting it and attaching it to the frame. And I'm just doing that by going around the very outer base wire there. So I'm only capturing that outer base wire. So I've gone in between the top two, you could say. And I'm just going to wrap around these first of all, or this rather. I like to do it around 3 times to make it secure. And obviously make sure the wraps are not overlapping each other. And then I'm just going to get to the end of my wire here and then bring in the star. And I'm going to go through that biggest one first because that's what I'm starting with, and then bring that all the way down. And I'm basically going to be attaching this using figure of 8 weave. So it's going to attach at that very point. So just kind of bring it into position and pull it tight to sit right next to the frame. And then I like to just go around the star again, just so that basically has 2 wraps, a little bit more secure. And then from there, go back to the frame. So see where I need to attach the other part, and then again come through that, just a single outer wire. Now the first part here is the most fiddly because obviously the stars are still loose, but it will get much easier when you attach it further down. And again, I'm just going to wrap around 3 times here, just like we did to begin with. And what I then like to do is go in and cut off the excess wire, but just leave a bit of a tail. and then just leave that like there for now. And I'm gonna go and attach it all the way along before I then go back and finish off the ends. I just find that the best way to do it. And of course, once you've attached all the way along here, then take the other stars you've made, just get rid of those ends and then attach that in the same way but opposite to this. So they're gonna end up sitting like this, but same principle, attach this by using all the points of the stars that meet up with the frame. And once I've attached them all, I'm just gonna go through and get rid of all the excess wire. So just starting from one end, cut off the excess, and I'm making sure to leave just a short little end so I can get my tweezer nose pliers and just push that, tuck it in basically, and just continue and just go around and do that all the way. So now I finished the front, I'm going to flip it to the back here, and what I just want to do is the very end of the bail that we made, I have my weaving wire still coming from that. I just want to use that to basically attach it to the other end of the bail, you could say. So fasten that open end. So just find a base wire where we can wrap it around a couple of times, and just again wrap it a few times until you feel like it's secure. And then once you've done that, cut off the excess of this and the other end of the 0.4 mil. And then all that's left to do now is deal with the wires here in the back, and of course also capture the cabochon in place. So what I like to do is take the furthest back wires here all the way in and just kind of start putting a curve into them so we don't have any obvious kinks or bends or anything. So I take the one that's going towards the left in this case and making it come back towards the right, so adding a curve in there and coming over the right side of the frame. Then I'm taking the equivalent one on the right side, and then just, if you need to, you can use your finger to smooth it out and help adding that curve in, and have it come to the opposite side as well. So you can see now they're crossing over each other, and have them be as even looking as possible. And then I take the next one from the left side again, add that curve in, bring it towards the right, and I bring that a little bit further up so there's a bit of space between them. And then the one on the right side, equivalent one there, just smooth it out, add a nice curve into it, and then bring it towards the left. So they are all coming from one side and adding that curve and basically coming back towards the side that they're coming from. And then we also get this nice effect or pattern there with the wires crossing over. And don't worry about these top two for now, because they're the ones that are coming completely from the front and going around the sides of the bail, so just kind of out of the way for now. I'm gonna deal with those last. And then we have the two wires coming from the bail still, which those I'm just going to have them come down and then basically be the top ones on the side. So again, use your finger. That warms up the wire and then makes it easier to add in a curve, and then bring them out to the sides as well as the top ones. So we more or less get this nice looking pattern of the wires crossing over and under each other. And then to be able to attach these to the frame, we need to just cut off the excess and make some little loops. So I'm just going to show you here. I'm just going to cut off the excess wire, but make sure I leave a short little length, just enough to make a loop. And always cut off too little, because you can always cut off a bit more, but obviously we can't add to it. And then I will just use round nose pliers and bring that inwards towards itself and create a little loop like this. And then, like I mentioned, if you want to bring it in a bit further, which I feel like I can, just cut off a little bit more of the wire at the end there, and then continue to bring in the wire to create that loop, and that just brings it in a bit further, and just basically bring it till it lines up with the frame there. And of course do the same on the other side and also with the rest of them. And then to attach these little loops to the frame, I'm just going to get another length of the 0.25 mil, again whatever you're comfortable working with, and take one loop at a time, just starting from the top. And then first of all attach the wire to the loop, and I'm doing that just by wrapping it around. Again, I prefer around 3 times, and then I need to attach it to the frame. And I'm going to be using, if you notice on the weave, we have these little kind of gaps at the very bottom part of where we added the little flourishes. So I'm going to take my wire, the long end, and bring it through the closest gap to this loop. So just through at the very bottom there, and then just grab that with my pliers. It's coming out at the back, pull it through, and then basically that wraps around that outer base wire that's incorporated into the frame. And then I'm just gonna take the wire, bring it back to the loop, and then finish up by wrapping around again 3 times on the loop. And then the first loop is attached. You can then cut off the excess. Again, I'm just leaving the little tails and going back and finish them off at the end. And then I'm just going to move to the top one on the other side, attach that as well, and then obviously do one at a time, moving my way down. And don't forget, Once I've done the top one on the other side as well, we do need to remember to add the cabochon. So just slide that in place underneath these wires. Remember, the back is facing this way and the front towards the stars there, so that as you're attaching the other loops to the frame, it's going to also capture the cabochon in place and be in there securely. So do that and finish off the ends in the exact same way as I showed you previously. And that is in the back sorted out. And then all that's left is to deal with these two last remaining base wires that are coming out towards the back next to the bail. And I'm going to just cut them down. So what I have is a short little length, and just the same on the other side. And then I'm going to take my tweezernose pliers, just grab one at a time right at the end, and then bend it inwards and tuck it up right underneath, you could say, where the bail is, and in underneath the frame there, and just tighten it. Of course, the same with the other one. And that way we also, first of all, finish off these wires, but we get rid of the ends so they're not sticking out anywhere and can catch or scratch on anything. And that is then those finished off, and your whole piece is now complete. Obviously, you just gotta attach some kind of chain, whatever you prefer. So that is how you capture a cabochon and cover it with stars.